right, sounds like you can, I think. Welcome to our March meeting, and it's great to see a huge crowd, Nature Nanaimo and Nault, and I'm sure there's lots of both of our groups here. And I'm Doug Fraser, one of the directors on the board of Nature Nanaimo. And so tonight we're gonna have a great presentation on otters, one of our favorite animals here in the Salish Sea. But before we get to that, we'll just we'll start with some neat, whoops, computer, so you have to click on it.
Yes.
Boy. So we'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the traditional territories of the Nanaimo and the Snuneymuxw First Nations. Beautiful place we live. We have the privilege to live, and whoops, this one's want to work. Our mission is to foster an interest, appreciation, and enjoyment of nature and promote the conservation of healthy natural ecosystems in the Nanaimo region. And now it's working. So we have a fairly good online presence. It's tough for us to sometimes keep up with it, but we have a web page, a wonderful web page. We're on Instagram, on Facebook. We have a YouTube channel, which I always say, subscribe. And our YouTube channel, there's not a lot on there. We have some nice Buttertubs little videos from Linda Stevens, one of our members, great photographer. And that's where we do post the recordings of the meetings, and we do Zoom recordings of the meetings. So I apologize, sometimes the audio isn't great because the in-person presentation is what people are really doing. But we do get a Zoom recording of it, and you can watch it online. Of course, you people are here, so you haven't missed the meeting. And then if you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, you can email us at info@naturenanaimo.ca. So just some of the outings we've had lately, and our outings, our outings and our presentations, I think our monthly meetings are the two most fun and easy things to take advantage of as a member of Nature Nanaimo. So I was away for this one, but we had a day on Gabriola, and so I just these are some of the pictures that were taken by members. We went to the ancient cedar, I forget the name of the walk, the Elder Cedar Walk kind of out there, and it was beautiful. And of course, the Malspina galleries there with the crazy sculpted limestone was beautiful. We also went to Stocking Creek just on St. Paddy's Day, and it was like forecasting for the atmospheric river, and all of that never happened. And I had to put a bunch of photos in here because Stocking Creek Falls is a really, really beautiful little spot. So if you miss that walk, if you get a chance, go to Stocking Creek Falls, because it's just so lovely a walk. And so there was only 5 of us, I think, on the walk, but we had a great time. And there was a big slugs joined us, and this was just the strangest thing. There was a large Douglas fir growing right through a pretty substantial cedar, and both of them were pretty healthy, but that Douglas fir had gotten pretty big. Yeah.
Could you hold the mic near your mouth?
Oh, sorry.
Coming from next door.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a meeting next door, sorry. Is that okay? Okay. So there was quite an unusual tree thing growing on there. There was just this time of year, the moss is super lush, right? Because there's, the light, it's warmed up enough that the moss has started growing, and it's got that beautiful moisture. And this particular trail is kind of in a little valley, and it's very humid in there. So there's a lot of moss on the trees there. So it was a particularly lush location. Kind of reminded me a little bit of Cathedral Grove. The trees aren't that big, but very, very lush. And a nice walk. There's a few muddy spots and a little bit of up and down, but really a pretty good trail. And you can see the stairways and stuff, which were only kind of modest number of them, were really, really nice ones. And then I just thought I'd pop in a couple pictures There's been a lot of sea lions because they always come to feed on the herring during the herring spawn time of year. And so some of them, like this week, there were large numbers at Neck Point. They've petered out now. We were at Piper's today. There's a few of them swimming around with bellies full of herring. But that was a picture of that Helena sent of some sea lions that were just out on the rock there at Neck Point. And Jeff he's online here, but he had sent some photos of the sea lions that were up at Deep Cove, Deep Bay, feeding on the herring up there. And it's, well, you might not want to live close to where there's 200 of them barking at night or something, but they are amazing, amazing animals. And there's a lot of them around to enjoy. So I just thought I'd throw in a few pictures of those sea lions if people haven't had a chance to see them. Some upcoming events, I think our outings committee is doing a great job. The 29th of March, which is a week from this coming Sunday, we're going to just do a walk around Buttertubs, a little spring birding walk. But if the timing is consistent, there'll be the bush tits will be nest building. And that's, if we get a chance to see them, it's just amazing to watch them build their little hanging nests out of spider web and lichen and moss. They put a lot of effort into it. Takes them a long time to build. Sometimes they get helpers, like last year's young'uns, some of them help out, but it's quite a nest that they build.
We found the one being built yesterday.
Oh, really? Okay. Is it? Oh, it's half done? Okay, well, tell it to slow down, take its time. Yeah. You can go over there and put a little tug on it or something. Yeah, hopefully, yeah. Well, and usually when we do that walk, by that time, there's usually 3 or 4, well, I shouldn't, no promises, but often you can see multiple bush tit nests from the trail around Buttertubs. So if we're lucky, we'll get to see a few of them. And there'll be other birds like, the yellow-rumped warblers and stuff are back now. So should be lots to see. The Brant Festival, we don't make the time for the Brant Festival. The Brant geese have been like up at Parksville for a while now. So hopefully they'll still be around when they have their official Brant Festival weekend, which is, I think, the 10th to the 13th is the Brant Festival official dates when they're running all of their events. And so we thought on the 11th, we've booked, reserved one of the picnic shelters at Rathtrevor Provincial Park. And so that's at noon hour. And so we thought at 10 o'clock in the morning before that, if people are interested and you register, you sign up, we'll go out and just look for the Brant geese and maybe, look around Englishman estuary, river estuary there just for a nice little walk. And then we'll have a, bring your own picnic at Rathtrevor at noon. And then people can do whatever they like after that as well. But so that's coming up on the 11th. Then on the 18th, we're doing an intertidal. There's a good low tide at 1 o'clock. And we're going to be at Cedar Boat Ramp, and we've gone there before. It's a good local spot. And Rick Harbo, who is an expert, is he's a marine biology guy. He writes guidebooks on intertidal zone life, so he's a pretty good guy to have with us. I think he's pretty busy. Like the next weekend, he's doing an intertidal thing on the Saturday too. But he's one of our members, and he's agreed to lead this walk on the 18th. I haven't sent out the announcement for that yet, but it will be coming out very soon, and you can sign up for that. The Tofino Shorebird Festival is, we don't arrange anything special for that, but during the week of, it's the 27th, the Monday is when the actual just shorebird expert birding things are. In the weekend before, there's a birding course, if you want to sign up for it, and there's something on the 3rd of May as well, but you can go on their website and see what's going on. But a few of us just go over there. The shorebirds are migrating back, and they use the Tofino mud flats and some of the sandy beaches and stuff in that area on their migration north. So it's just a beautiful place to go anyway. Gives you a good excuse to go over to Tofino Ucluelet and see some shorebirds. And there are some absolute expert birders on the Tofino mudflats kind of every morning, well, kind of timed to the tides for that week. And so if you go over there any week, you can just drop in and have these expert birders ID these shorebirds for you. May 3rd, there's a work party. This is well, it's fun, right? But it's not as fun maybe. But we go to Butter Tubs and we're kind of due there to remove some broom. So May 3rd, there's going to be a Butter Tubs broom busting event. Staffen will be probably leading a walk, wildflowers in Harwood Plains in May sometime, haven't picked a date yet. But we always do kind of a walk. Go and look at the beautiful wildflowers at Harwood Plains. Oh, I should have mentioned, you know, if you go to Piper's Lagoon now, the fawn lilies there, I don't think I've ever seen so many fawn lilies in one spot. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them out on the peninsula there on the end of Piper's Lagoon. And then May 22nd, Sinjin, who I don't think is here right now, but he's leading a walk to Mount Suhalen Ecological Reserve, which is just near Duncan there, kind of in Duncan. And it's a nice, it's kind of up on a hillside, mountainside, I guess. And it's a Gary Oak meadow and there's lots of nice wildflowers there. So it's just a nice walk. And then we have some, well, our picnic is the 27th. So that's in there. Just we haven't, you know, you'll learn lots more about that as the picnic arrives. But you've already received this week, you know, the registration opportunity for the June 3rd trip to Princess Louisa Inlet. And actually, maybe Nancy, do you want to talk about it or just answer questions? Okay, it's because Nancy's the leader and the expert on it. It's a beautiful inlet with Chatterbox Falls at the end of it, and so we're going to get a water taxi ride from Egmont on the Sunshine Coast there, up the inlet, view the falls, you know, just enjoy the scenery and what, you know, whatever we see, and that's going to require 2 nights staying on the Sunshine Coast the night before. So you're there early in the morning. It's a 9:30 departure from the government dock in Egmont. And then when you come back at the end of the day, I mean, you could in theory get back to Nanaimo late at night, but it's strongly advised to just spend that second night on the Sunshine Coast everywhere. Now that's, we have a limited number there, so we're going to draw names. You know, we'll fairly pick who gets to go if too many people are in, but you have until next Tuesday night at midnight to register and get your name in the draw if you want to go. But anyways, that's going to be a beautiful outing. If there's any questions, Nancy is here and she can answer them. Oh, okay, yeah, that would be good too. Yeah. And we sent out a fairly detailed, I think, Nancy sent out a fairly detailed description of everything that's involved. But yeah, it's a beautiful place. Then the Eagle Show is and actually, I didn't call it What the Hake, which is what it's going to be called, because hake as in the hake fish, Hake. This Eagle Show out of Campbell River is it's a boat tour over to where these large numbers of eagles are just sitting in trees waiting for the hake to be brought to the surface by these strong tidal flows. And I guess the hake can't avoid it, and they're brought to the surface. And once that happens, the eagles just go out and feast on the hake. And so it's just this show that the eagles put on, feeding on hake, and then it's over when the tides change and it just stops. But it'll be a beautiful tour in terms of whale watching and stuff like that, and scenery as well. But that's coming up in July. I haven't sent out the announcement and the registration for that yet. but it will also be a limited number of people. Then just got this coincidentally last night, which is good timing for us to share this information, is that YES, which is a great organization, the Yellowstone Ecological Society down Yellow Point. Did I say Yellowstone? Yellow Point. They're putting on a bio blitz from April 24th to the 27th. There is, they sent us, they have this poster with these QR codes. So you can, but you can just Google Yes BioBlitz and it takes you to their website, which has a very detailed description of it. But it's really interesting. Like on the one day they go to Holland Creek and do a BioBlitz there. On the next day, Rick Harbaugh is, that's the 25th, is doing an intertidal zone walk near like Oyster Bay there down near Ladysmith. Then the next day, they're going to Hemmer Park and they're going to do a BioBlitz of the Camas Meadows there. And then the next day, they're doing a Cable Bay Trail blitz. So you can participate multiple days, just one day, you know, if you like. But anyways, it sounds like a very worthwhile event, and you can be a citizen science and help contribute to, you know, getting data on the biodiversity around here. Yes.
I'm new. What is the purpose of the BioBlitz?
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, so bio blitzes are these ways that citizens just go out and photograph or document, observe anything and everything, you know, like plants, slugs, like whatever. And to participate, many bio blitzes, including this one, use the iNaturalist app. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like a citizen science database also of observations of living things around the world. And so you just take all these photos of whatever you see and you just upload them to iNaturalist and you tell them, you know, like it's the Yes Bio Blitz. And so that database then becomes, you know, used by researchers or whatever for, you know, kind of documenting whatever living things are in these particular spots. So there's been a bunch of bio blitzes in our region, you know, different groups have them. But anyway, this is one, sounds good. And it says it's there, I'm not sure how many they've done, to be honest, but they may do these every year. I'm not sure if, but they're very well organized. So now I'll turn it over to Stefan to introduce our speaker.
Thanks, Doug. So I'm Stefan Lindgren. I am currently not on board, but I was the founding president until Doug took over. Anyway, so Linda Nichol was supposed to do this talk in November, but I had a senior moment and booked somebody else on top of it. So, but she was very gracious to agree to do this talk today instead. So Linda is a research biologist at DFO's Pacific Biological Station here in town, which is a fantastic place with tons of scientists and people who know things. She's been leading a marine or leading sea otter surveys and has worked on marine mammal projects for about 20 years. Oh, sorry. So, so in order to survey sea otters, you have to go to places apparently that aren't so pleasant. So she's been in little boats on the West Coast, up and down the BC coast, and I assume in fairly rough conditions once in a while. But anyway, everybody loves these little critters. So without further ado, we invite Linda up to tell us all about them.
Yeah, because there's some people. This should work once I,
Once you pull it.
whoops.
Just go back. With this arrow, go with this arrow. There, you just. Back in there. All right. That's great. So you can sit here? Sit
Well,
here?
yeah, you consider stand as long as they should be able to see if. you're
Okay.
kind of in this
Right.
general direction.
We do it this. Hi, good evening, everybody. It's really fun to be here. Super glad you're interested in hearing about otters. The title, this is totally Linda Bruyman of Nalts. I would have come up with something much more sea otters of British Columbia. So you could thank, you can, oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's not on.
No, it's not on. Okay, what's the trick? Am I supposed to use this one?
Yep.
Oh, does it work now? Oh, maybe I just have to put it, does that work? Really? That works better?
Yeah.
Well,
Closer to your mouth.
not sure how to get it closer to my mouth. Okay, stand by.
Is that loud enough?
No, it's not really. I'll just move it up to,
No, no, that should be, all right. I'll just.
put it here.
Fine.
Never mind.
It's fine, then.
Okay, great, like that, whatever, okay. All right, so yeah, just to say the title, this is a Linda Bruyman title. She said, make it fun. So you could thank Linda Bruyman. I would have come up with something slightly duller. So, yeah, so my name is Linda Nichol. I work in the cetacean research program at the biological station. So we work actually on whales and sea otters, and another part of our team works on seals and sea lions as well. So we're a good source if you want to know about other species as well. So I'm going to break my talk down. This is into a series of topics, and I've inserted river otters into this talk, which I might add, I'm not an expert on river otters, but it's been really fun pulling together some information to add here about the river otter. Because the key point is people get them confused a lot. After all, we live along the coast and we see otters, and people assume that they're sea otters. So I'm going to start with a description, then a little bit about the sea otter's near extinction, which is a really important and unfortunate event, but has taught us a lot about ecosystems and how species interact within ecosystems and how important those interactions are and what happens when we lose a species. And there's sort of a story there that parallels, we can think of that as something that's happening with other species around the world as well, including here on Vancouver Island. Then I'll talk about biology, social organization, population trends with just some maps, and about the cool stuff at the end that I think is the take-home message that I want to give you about sea otters and their interactions. So first of all, the sea otter is the smallest of the marine mammals. It's the smallest. It's only about the size of, well, a dog, a Labrador retriever with short legs. So quite big, but not as big as a river otter. I mean, much bigger than a river otter. One thing that's super different about them is that they have their hind feet have been modified into flippers so that they can literally paddle with their back feet. So that makes it, they're very efficient in the water, not so great on land. So they rarely come out on land. The other thing about a sea otter is it doesn't have any blubber. And I'm going to bring this point home again. So a little bit in the next slide. So these guys don't have anything to keep them warm except their fur and their high metabolic rate. That fur, 100,000 hairs per square centimeter. If you want to think about that, for those of us with a full head of hair, we've got about 100,000 hairs on our head. So they're really, it's fine and it's incredibly dense and incredibly beautiful. It's also the reason for their ultimate downfall and with humans. But they have to groom that fur all the time to keep air inside that fur because it's the layer, it's the tiny air bubbles caught in the fur that is actually what's keeping them warm. And this high metabolic rate, which is their furnace. So let's go back to blubber. So seals, we have lots of those in the Strait of Georgia. Here's a seal looking nice and rotund, very smooth, round edges. That's because this seal's got a big, thick layer of fat, like a wetsuit that's keeping it dry. I put a cross section over there so you can imagine just how thick that blubber is. It's literally connective tissue with fat in it, and it keeps the seal warm. So seals and whales and dolphins, they all have this design to stay warm in the ocean. But the poor old sea otter doesn't have that. All it's got is a really high metabolic rate pumping out heat and really special, dense, fine fur. And to fuel that high metabolic rate, if you're gonna pump out lots of heat, you gotta eat lots of food as well. So this figure is just showing you a graph of how much higher a sea otter's metabolic rate is compared to other terrestrial carnivores. And you can see the sea otter is way off the chart compared to a cheetah or a hyena. I also went, as you can see my references below, most of this I got from a publication, but I Googled for some other things and I've kind of put where I think the river otter would sit. So the river otter is also slightly elevated because when it's swimming in the water, it too would get cold. Like we all get cold when we go swimming, right? So, so the river otter is a little bit higher as well. Just to bring it home again, a river otter is a lot smaller. You can see that from my little note on the side there. They're a lot smaller than a sea otter as well. So what do these animals eat? Back to the sea otter. So the sea otter has got to eat a lot of food. And in fact, it eats about 20-25% equivalent of its body weight a day in food to generate the heat it needs to maintain its body. One of the cool things about sea otters is that they bring their food to the surface. So they dive down, they pick up the food off the bottom of the water, the sea, or along the rock edges. They bring it to the surface and they lay on their back, put it on the table that's their belly, and they eat it. And so because of that, we can collect data on what these animals are eating simply by painstaking observation using very high-powered spotting scopes from shore. And so there's a lot of really good data on this, on looking at diets of sea otter populations at different densities, so where there's not very many otters, so everybody can pretty much eat the same big prey, to areas where there's lots of otters and there's maybe a little more competition for what there is to eat. What we know is what sea otters are eating from watching these things, that they're eating all kinds of invertebrates. They're eating sea urchins, clams, crabs, sea cucumbers, abalone, snails, octopus, chitons, and I could go on and list more things, but it's a huge swath, and what you'll notice about them is that they're all invertebrates, no fish. So these guys are eating prey that is either completely sessile or moving fairly slowly. So that's what they're designed to eat. And then this is a little graph just to show you as I mentioned, I just hinted that the diet of these animals changes over time. When they come into an area where they haven't been for a long time, and there's a lot of prey, everybody can pretty much eat the same sort of prey, and it's all quite big. They're eating big urchins and big clams. And then over time, as the area becomes more populated with otters, the otters are diversifying their diet, and they're eating a lot of other things like small mussels and small crabs. So the diet diversifies. And this graph, what it's showing from the top to the bottom are different places where my colleague, Erin Foster, collected data for her PhD, looking at the diet of sea otters. And she looked at these different places, and they're based on how long otters have been in the area. So the one at the top is where otters had just arrived. It was like, whoa, look at all these big sea urchins. So they were eating big sea urchins. By the time the site at the bottom that she went to, Gosling Rocks, has been occupied for 30 years or more. So otters have been established there. So the diet was quite different. So that's one of the really interesting studies. There's studies like this being done in other parts of the sea otter range as well, to understand how the sea otter's foraging behavior changes the environment. So what are a couple more things about these cute little guys? Their paws. So they use these very sensitive and powerful paws, and they're very powerful. They got very short, but very powerful forearms for prying things off the bottom, prying those clams or digging those clams, or prying an abalone off a rock, that sort of thing. And then they bring it to the surface and they use those paws to manipulate it to eat. And the sea otter lives not in the Salish, not on the east coast of Vancouver Island. There are the odd sighting, but mostly where we've got them on this coast is on the west coast of Vancouver Island and some areas on the central BC coast. They're in areas that are very exposed, rugged, west coasty habitat. They're usually within 1 to 2 kilometers of shore, because the sea otter is constrained. Pretty much they're diving to maybe 20, 30 meters maximum to find their prey. So they're not going into much deeper water than that. They can go to 100 meters, or some males that do, but most animals are feeding at 20 to 30 meters. So that constrains them close to the shore in these really rugged areas. The river otter. You'll notice throughout this that I'm referencing photos. So if it's got a site, if it doesn't have a reference to the photo, it means it's me or one of my colleagues. But otherwise, I make sure this I found on Facebook. So this woman, if anybody knows her from Nanaimo, was an incredible photograph.
Remember.
She's a member, well, this is absolutely stunning. So I poached it right there because, well, it was on Facebook anyway. So, this is a river otter, totally different animal. These guys feed on fish, lots of fish, some other things, but fish. And they're not considered a marine mammal. And the reason they're not considered a marine mammal is because they actually spend a lot of time on land. They den on land, they run around on land. Their young are born on land and stay on land for a period of time until they're ready to learn how to swim. So these guys are feeding in the intertidal and the shallow subtidal, and they're feeding mainly on fish. And then they bring those ashore. And you can see, and you'll see in a video I show you later, they're quite capable of running around. They don't have modified hind flippers. They simply have paws that are webbed to let them swim. And this guy, this photograph is extraordinary. He's got a sculpin in his mouth. It's a really wonderful photo. And where do these animals live? Well, I decided to actually look at some studies that have actually been done right here in the Strait of Georgia. And so this is, of course, they live in other parts of the coast. They occur throughout coastal British Columbia, but right here in our backyard, where are river otters? So on the left is a chart that I snipped, and I've got little dots on there. I don't know if you can see them. These little dots all here. These are sites where he was a graduate student at the time, did a study looking at river otters in the Strait of Georgia and looking at the diet of these things by collecting their scat. So not like a sea otter where you can get a scope out and watch what they're feeding on. With these guys, it's a little harder to figure out what they eat, and you have to actually collect the poop and clean the poop and look at the hard parts. So that's what he did in that study. But the point about those dots is it shows you, yes, those are indeed the kind of habitat. These animals are on land and they're right close to the shore. On the right-hand side of my screen is a very cool map. This is a study done by a student who came from Concordia University. And with some help, she did a really cool study on Protection Island, looking at all the places that sea otters, that river otters were using. And Marion probably knows her in the story. So all those dots are places where they put up trail cams, or they found scats or latrines, which are like communal pooping spots, or sightings of them, and all the way around. And so again, these animals are associated with that shoreline area, places where they can get from the rocks down into the water. And then of course they do like docks. And oh shoot, I got to go back because I just love this video. This is, how am I going to make it work like that? Maybe I could, can I click on the middle? This is a fellow, he lives in Squamish, and he makes the most amazing, is it gonna play? He does beautiful videos. So this is not a sea otter, this is a river otter, this is a river otter, this is a river otter. See how it's running around? And it's in sea, but it's a river otter. And the long pointy tail, long pointy tail, be a quiz at the end, everybody, pay attention. And they can run around, and they definitely don't have flippers for their feet. And this is a sort of a typical grouping of otters, and they're pooping on the dock. Oop, I guess I'll get out of that now. They're pooping on the dock like a good old river otter.
Then you just click forward.
There we go. Okay, so back to science. Okay. So the river otter died in the Strait of Georgia. So this on the right here, I've made this graph based on the data that was collected by Gary Stenson in that study where he collected the poop. There's a little bit of poop down there. So the scientist takes the poop, you clean it all up, and you look at all the hard parts, and you identify the species by the little hard parts. And what he found was that most of the time these guys are eating fish. Did I mention fish? Fish. So they're eating sculpins and gunnels, lots of small fish that you find in the near shore, the very near shore, and relatively slow moving fish. So they're not eating really fast fish because they can't catch up. Interestingly, they also eat birds. And apparently they catch them by catching them underwater. So they pull them down from above. But as you can see, it's not a major part of their diet at all. And that seems to be the story everywhere.
The overlap.
They overlap. Oh, yes, someone in the audience is pointing out they're eating crabs, which also sea otters eat as well. That's true. But sea otters would eat a lot more crab. So I wish I could get that little thing off the top there. Maybe I can't. Stand by, everybody. Oh, well, we'll live with it.
There's a tiny X in that bubble, that you click on.
Yeah, I just can't. Oh, hang on. I was trying to get a mouse to go there.
You had the mouse.
I know, and then it disappears. Well, we'll just live with it. It just says different teeth for different diets. So on the left is the sea otter, which has powerful jaws for crushing hard-shelled prey. And what you can see, I'm hoping in this, is that the molars are flattened. They're not flattened because it's worn them down through life. They're actually evolved that way. So the molars are these flat mallets for crushing hard-shelled prey. On the right is a river otter. And the river otter's molars have got these bumps on them. So they're still craggy so that they can catch and tear fish apart. What you'll see with both of them, though, is that they've got canines. They've got these incisor teeth. I think they're called inside, the long ones. Anyway, the point is these are carnivores, just like your dog or your cat. So these are carnivores as well. So you see different teeth for different lifestyles. Okay, now, oh, there we go. Okay, that's a bit of now you've got the idea difference between river otters and sea otters. Now we're going to move back to sea otters, pretty much just sea otters. The story of the sea otter is a story of a species that extended historically from northern Japan all the way around the rim of the Aleutian Islands, all the way, pretty well continuously, all the way to Baja California. But it was wiped out in a relatively brief period of time when it was first discovered by the Russian explorers in the Aleutian Islands in the mid-1700s. And they began a hunt of those animals, enslaving Aleut people to do the hunting for them. Then Captain Vancouver arrived off Nootka, Friendly Cove, in 1778, and his crew, his men, traded for sea otter pelts with the people there at Nootka. And they discovered when they took them to China how valuable they were, how much money they got for them. And so that spawned another surge in this intense trade. In the case of all the areas south of the Aleutians, it was a trade with the First Nations people, and it was intensive. And the sea otter was pretty well wiped out to less than 1% of the pre-fur trade population size by 1911. In fact, by 1850, well, here, let's just stop for a minute. We'll go back to the Aleutians. So the Aleutians, there's actually pretty good data on the actual catches of otters because the Russian American company kept pretty good records. So just in a relatively brief period, 1741 to 1867, 800,000 sea otters were harvested. Just to give you the magnitude of this intense harvest. On the BC coast, or like this, actually from Southeast Alaska down, that area took off by 1778 as a result, as I said, of Captain Cook arriving at Nootka. I hope I said Cook before, not Vancouver, because I meant Captain Cook. Wrong guy. I meant Captain Cook. Captain Vancouver came later. We don't have as much information about how many otter pelts were taken because there just aren't the same sort of records. So there's little samples, little snippets. And we know, for example, that in a brief period of 2 years, there's a record of 30,000 skins from an area that would have been BC and the southern part of Southeast Alaska. So a really huge intensive trade. What it means is that the animal was commercially extinct. The traders had moved on by 1850. And it's probable that the sea otter was ecologically extinct at that point too. And you can just think about that. I'll tell you what that means later. But by 1911, we have less than 1% of that pre-fur trade population. I want to go back one. It's going to let me go back one. There we go. Nope, back 2. There we go. So on this map, which I showed you before, you see the little dots. little dots over the map, those are the places where the remaining population existed by 1911. So probably about 1,500 animals in total. There's one little dot at the northwest corner of Haida Gwaii. That little group was gone by the 1920s. So hunting still continued after 1911, where animals could be encountered, you know, opportunistically by people, because one pelt could change your life. There's an ad in the British Colonists from that time of a house. You could buy a house in Victoria for the equivalent of 2 sea otter pelts. So that would drive anybody who lived anywhere, you know, so the concept, but there was no concept of conservation at that point, but the concept of conserving the otters wouldn't have come into play with that type of a win.
Like fur coats and hats.
Yeah,
Is that what they-
yeah, it was for fur coats, robes for Chinese royalty. Yeah. So there we are, the last sea otter after that was known to have been shot on Vancouver Island between 1929 and 1931. Not quite sure of the date. And after that, there were no sea otters on the BC coast. So now I'm just talking about BC until 1969, 1972. Over that period, animals were translocated from Alaska to BC. And they were translocated into my red dot, which is pointing at Checklisset Bay on the west coast of Vancouver Island. That was determined to be really good habitat. It looked like the kind of habitat where those remnant populations still existed in Alaska. And so the biologists thought this would be a good place. In the top corner there, you see a nuclear explosion. That's a good reminder because actually the whole impetus for doing these translocations came because the Americans were doing nuclear testing at Amchitka and wildlife was being killed. And so there was a desire to try and move some of those animals out. So Alaskan biologists came up with the idea of translocating some of these animals. And some of them were taken to Southeast Alaska, some to Washington State, and we also got some. So there were three translocation efforts that occurred for a total of 89 animals. Probably less than, probably 30 of them, 30, 35 of them actually survived overall to reproduce. Okay, so they did reproduce, they did establish themselves, and we have a recovering sea otter population in British Columbia. So a little bit about them. As someone said, as I was introduced, yes, I've spent a lot of time on the coast in small boats going up and down the coast doing population surveys. And when we do, we encounter sea otters in different configurations, sometimes as individuals and sometimes in mostly often in groups, these rafts, these aggregations of animals floating at the surface. They have consistent areas where they typically raft, and they segregate into male rafts and into mum pup rafts in different parts of the range or in the areas. And this is another little video. It's an aerial from a UAV. I'm just showing you what our animals in a raft look like. This is life in a raft. This is a raft of mum pups. There's one little teeny pup in the middle there with its mum, and there's one further up, but they're just floating around on their backs. They're snoozing. You can see how their tails are flattened and rounded at the end, and they use them like an oar to paddle around. Nothing like a river otter tail. And that's life in a raft. So they spend a lot of time doing that, a lot of time grooming to keep that fur warm, because remember, that's all that's keeping them warm, and then foraging. So the one up in the corner up there, she's got a little pup hanging off the side of her. So that's what I'm pointing out. You've got these mum pup rafts in the range. These animals are not migratory. So when they establish in an area, the animals, each animal has a range that's overlapping with other animals. It's really tens of kilometers of coastline, and that's where they live for their whole lives. And they aggregate in these rafts to rest, and this is a mum pup raft. And I meant to point to the pups, but never mind. These are male rafts. This is 2 examples of male rafts. They're often very sort of dense, and they can be really big. And they're often, well, there's no pups in them anyway. They're just resting. So there's a lot of wrestling and tussling that goes on in male rafts. And the females they reproduce, obviously. they're the powerhouse of the population. They're producing a pup. In sea otters, males, it's one male mating with many females. So most of the males are not contributing in any year to the population. And these females have this pup with them. The pup's dependent for 6 to 8 months, and they reproduce approximately every year, starting at the age of between 3 and 5 for the rest of their lives. And they're really good mums. They care for that pup. They carry that pup on their belly. So the sea otter can only have one pup. They've evolved to have only one pup because they simply can't take care of more if the animal has to be on their belly. Whereas the river otter, denning on land, can have a litter of 3 to 5 kids. Anyway, juvenile mortality is what controls population growth, but we'll skip that. Moving on. Okay, surveys. So after the sea otter was reintroduced, and there it was, we knew there were animals. 1970, the one in 1972, that translocation was most successful. The first surveys to monitor the population was in 1977. And I put up at the top there is a scan of one of the charts that's still in my filing cabinet from the previous biologists who worked in this program, with handwritten notes showing where the otters were on a particular date and how many they counted. Well, we continue to do boat-based surveys and some helicopter. And again, it's visual. We're searching visually for otters, and we're counting and estimating group sizes. The only difference from those earlier ones is that we've got a bit more technology on our boat to track what we're doing and where we are. So that's my team and I out doing a survey. We now have a time series from 1977 to actually 2024, but I said 2023 there, tracking the population growth and the distribution of them. So I'm going to jump to that now. I'm just going to show you, this is like an animation of sea otter population growth. Oh, it didn't work. Okay, let's go back. What happened? What happened? It should be this. Oh, that's odd. It's not showing. Okay, well, oh, there it is. Okay, let's see if it'll work now. Maybe I just have to click on it like that. There we go. Okay, so the first one was, that one is where the sea otter was in 1977. There was about 50 animals at the top red dot and another 15 animals down off Nootka Island. That was the population of BC. Whoops, that didn't work. How did I make that work? Okay, let's go next. There we go. Okay, by 1977, the population had extended further along the coast, and there was also animals found up on the Goose Island group on the central coast. Oh, this isn't really. And there it's expanded by 2021 or 2001. No, sorry. Okay, let's go back. Here we go. Okay, and by 2004, down into Clayoquot Sound. By 2008, we've got more extension up onto the central BC coast and out onto the Scott Islands. By 2013, a little bit more on the northeast, the mainland, just north of Vancouver Island. In 2017, we had a population, an estimate of about just over 8,000 animals. And now our most recent estimates of about 2023 is we're looking at about 12,000 animals on the BC coast. So this is well, from probably about 30 that originally survived from the translocation in Checklisset Bay. So a really beautiful success story about recovery. This is animals that have moved back into habitat that they previously existed. This is they're recolonizing areas that the species occupied before. But I just want to, throw this map up as well, just to point out, because I've shown you that swath, it looks like they're continuously everywhere. They're not. This map is showing clusters of hotspots of where otters are at higher density. So you can see that some habitat is more profitable for an otter for them to be living in than other areas. So the areas in blue have lower densities of otters.
Would Queen Charlotte's be a good place for them to?
Yes, it is. And the Haida Gwaii is a place where we will expect more occupation or animals to recover there. They just haven't established fully. They're starting there. There's actually some animals there, and we're going to start to see some recovery of the population there. Yeah. So the ecological effects, this is to my mind, the really important take-home message of the story. The thing about the sea otter is that because it was removed and so dramatically, and then as it came back, and because they eat so much, They're called a keystone species. They have such a profound effect on the ecosystem. Biologists were able to see what a difference it made for the otters to be removed and the otters to be brought back. So the most famous story is that by Jim Estes and his colleague, published in Science in 1974. They showed in Alaska, in the Aleutian Islands, that when sea otters are absent, you get these carpets of urchins. These are herbivores, and they graze over the ground, and they're eating all the algae so that the kelp cannot grow. When the sea otter comes in, they feed on those urchins, they reduce the density of urchins, and they release the kelp from this predation pressure, and you get a kelp forest. And that has a whole bunch of cascading effects in rocky ecosystems. So that was a really important discovery. It's about how a species structures an ecosystem and causes a cascade of effects that influence other species. And this phenomenon is not limited to sea otters, but this is the best known story. So when the sea otter was wiped out, these incredible abundances of shellfish emerged. And this is a picture from California in the early 1800s. This is a mountain of California abalone shells, a mountain of shells. And that's because they were so abundant, because of course there was no otters affecting where abalone could exist or the size of abalone. And even today, and starting in about the 1950s and 60s, when scuba diving equipment was developed, dive fisheries developed for some of these invertebrates. So species like these are sea cucumbers. So this is a present day sea cucumber harvest. And it's not working. Okay, I'll just go back. I'm not getting all my pictures. Come on. Nope, I want to go backwards. I want to go backwards. There we go. Okay, let's try that. Okay, it doesn't work. Oh, well. So that's the sea cucumber, but it's also like gooey ducks and urchin fisheries. All of these things were hugely profitable fisheries with huge numbers of these animals and in big sizes and big abundance. And that's because the sea otter had been removed from the ecosystem. There we go. That's your yummy looking sea cucumber. And there's the gooey duck. So these are all species that sea otters eat as well. Oh, no, it went ahead. I didn't want to go ahead. Shoot. Okay, so back to the past. I came upon this quote with an understanding of sea otters. I came upon this quote by George Dawson, and he wrote this in 1877. Now, the sea otter was probably wiped out from Haida Gwaii by the probably almost the turn of the beginning of the 1800s. And he makes this observation that at the high water mark, in some places, large urchins are thickly spread upon the bottom. And that tells you that the sea otter was gone from at least southern Haida Gwaii. So the effect of the sea otter was rapid and powerful even at that time. And now I want this to play. It's a video. Is it going to play? Okay, so this is a video from a drone that we've taken, and it's showing a raft of sea otters. Can you see them sort of splashing in the water? It's a big raft of male sea otters in Checklisset Bay, and they're over top of a huge kelp bed of macrocystis kelp. Well, a really cool study done by a student, he's long graduated from UBC. He looked at kelp forests and the productivity of kelp forests in areas with otters and the size of them, their extent in areas without otters on Vancouver Island. And what he found was that the kelp beds were 4 times deeper, meaning they extended further into the subtidal and then where otters weren't present, and that they were almost 19 times larger. So huge kelp beds. Now this is the direct result of sea otter foraging. So sea otters reducing the density of these herbivorous invertebrates. So these kelp forests grow. And these kelp forests are not just what's at the surface. At the surface here, you're looking at macrocystis kelp, but under there's a whole suite of other species, understory kelp, that make up that forest. And the kelp forest can almost be seen as a successional stage forest, just like we see on land. You've got perennials and annual types of algae. And I just put a paper by Jane Watson on the corner to remind myself. She's also someone here from Nanaimo, has done some incredible work on the west coast of Vancouver Island, monitoring the effects of sea otters over a 30-year period and the changes in these kelp forests. So sea otters create this type of habitat. Oh, shoot. So once you create this forest, what does it mean? Well, it turns out, this is what Russ Markell was able to show, was that in these forests, you have increased productivity. Benthic productivity is 20 times higher in these sea otter created kelp forests. And fish abundance is also greater. These are rockfish and also the smaller fish that they prey on. The kelp forest creates habitat, and they in that habitat, and they're large and they're productive. And fundamentally, the food webs become more complex. So you have longer and more species interactions in the food webs as a result of the kelp forest. So these are what we call cascading effects of the sea otter as the keystone predator. In the Aleutian Islands, which is a different ecosystem than our coast, Duggins was able to show that kelp-derived carbon, so the carbon from the kelp, from the detritus of kelp falling down in the forest, being consumed by shellfish. So instead of them grazing, they become detritivores, was actually 2 times higher, meaning that the kelp forest was also providing food to the invertebrates that lived in them. So you get these massive changes. Now, the other thing about sea otters is they eat a lot of clams. Turns out clams is really an important part of their diet, probably important at all times of the year. It's food they can get when it's really rough and very exposed in winter conditions. So these guys are eating at least 50, if not more than that % of their diet is probably clams at different times. And for these, they're excavating in soft sediment. This is a picture that I received years ago. It's actually in the intertidal zone. So sea otters will excavate into the soft sediment at high tide in intertidal areas for those clams, and they'll also excavate at low tide. I mean, in the subtidal for these clams. And in so doing, they disrupt those clam beds. They create space for other larval invertebrates to settle. They create broken shells scattered everywhere that the larvae can settle on. So these are the disturbance effects of sea otters that alter the habitat as well. But another very cool thing, and this is some recent work also just out by a colleague of mine, Erin Foster, for her PhD, it's published in Science, is that sea otters have a profound effect on eelgrass by digging for clams in eelgrass beds. So just like that scuba diver is, there's clams down there. That's why you can see all that broken shell. Sea otters forage in those areas. And when they do that, they disrupt the rhizome structure of there's like the rooty structure of the eelgrass. And eelgrass can either reproduce asexually, which means there's no genetic change. There's no difference in the genetics between the parent eelgrass and the offspring, or they can reproduce sexually. And when they're disrupted like this, it increases sexual reproduction, and that increases biodiversity or genetic diversity within the eelgrass bed. So turns out that eelgrass respond very positively to disruption, and it increases their resilience and their genetic diversity. And sea otters have a role in that. Probably people have as well, when there were more people on the coast were harvesting clams in eelgrass beds as well. But sea otters are definitely played a role. So that's my story about the sea otter. I want you to take home that it's really cool. They're really cute. They've come back. They've made this amazing recovery. But what's more profound about them is they teach us an important story about interactions, that it's the interactions of a species with the other species in the ecosystem that's really important. And when you lose those species, you lose those interactions. So there's a very cool paper out also by Jim Estes and others. And many people have been studying this, looking at these types of interactions and seeing if they exist in other systems, and they do. For example, just at the top there is an Arctic fox, and it turns out in the Aleutian Islands, where seabirds nest on land, just like at Triangle Island or the Scott Islands, where they nest on land in burrows, they come ashore and they poop and they drop bits of fish when they're taking them to their young in the burrows. And in so doing, they drop fertilizer. They bring ocean nutrients as subsidies to the land, just like when we put compost in our garden. And so it's lush. And when the Arctic fox is present, which I think was introduced to that area inadvertently, the birds aren't there because they're eating the birds. So the bird population is diminished or not present, and so you don't get that effect. So it's not really about one is better than the other. It's just demonstrating that you lose that interaction. And there's other examples on the other side. I've got sea stars, and there's one there about a fish called a bass that feeds on small fish in lakes. Those small fish feed on zooplankton, and the zooplankton feed on phytoplankton. And the phytoplankton is what makes the water murky. And so when the bass is there, it's eating a lot of those little fish. And that means that the zooplankton aren't being consumed by the little fish. And so the zooplankton can eat the phytoplankton, and so you get more water clarity. So you see all these relationships. So the point is that I want you to think about, I think it's interesting to think about these types of relationships. And personally, I'm really interested to know more about some of the large mammals on Vancouver Island that we have, and what sort of ecosystem interactions they have or have had given the changes in their population size. But that's the important message, that interactions really matter. So I just want to say that all the work I do on sea otters has been supported by Fisheries and Oceans, who I work for, through our Species at Risk program. There are other people who collaborated on this type of work, including the New Chalmers Tribal Council and nations as members of that, and the Guayhanas and the Haida Gwaii, the Haida Nation, and HealthSig have helped at various times with different types of survey work. There's just a huge host of people that I should thank, but I'm not going to add them all. Okay, a quiz. I did mention a quiz. We are having, and my computer's going to die. Is there a plug-in for this? We need a plug. Okay, the quiz. I have to sit down because I got to read it. Okay, so on one side are pictures of sea otters, and on the other side are pictures of river otters. And I'm going to ask a question, and you tell me if it's a sea otter or a river otter, and then I will bring up the answer, and it will put a checkbox on which side of the box it should be on. So, which species swims and forages at sea? And it can be both, or it could be one of them. Both. Is it working? Is it filling in? Come on. Okay, and you'll be really glad to know this is short and it's going to be over soon. Okay, let's see. Can I make it work like that? If I go like that, there. Okay, there, we'll do it that way. Okay, the next one. Which species climbs out on docks and floats? And river otters. Excellent. Okay, which one eats mainly fish?
River otter.
Well done. Which one brings its prey ashore to eat? Correct. Eats prey by lying on its back at sea with its belly at the beginning. Sea otter.
Sea otter.
Well, I want you to win. Okay. Dens on land, sometimes under people's houses. River otter. Okay, okay. Has several young in a litter. River otter, good.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. Has a long pointy tail.
River.
Swims on its belly.
Swims on its belly.
Swims
River.
on its belly most of the time is a river. You're right. Sometimes it does. That wasn't a very fair question. Okay. Swims on its back most of the time.
Sea.
Sea otter. Lives at sea, like its whole life. Sea otter.
Sea otters.
Clumsy on land. Large hind flippers. Sea otter.
Sea otters.
Births at sea and carries its single pup on its belly.
Sea otter.
Adult weighs about 14 pounds, like an overweight cat. Correct. Adult weighs 27 to 45 pounds, like a big dog. Sea otter. Good. Excellent. Okay, you pass. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Not to raft of sea otters in very rugged exposed habitat in the winter. Yeah.
Mom and the pup, when the mother has a pup,
Yes.
how are they able to dive deep to get some food?
The pup, when the pup, so when a mother has given birth to a pup, the pup is very vulnerable. And the female has to leave the pup just floating at the surface like a little cork while she dives. And so what she does in that situation is she chooses habitat that's very shallow. She's very careful about where she chooses to forage, so she doesn't have to leave the pup very long.
Well, because
They
eagles
also-
can get-
Because, exactly, because eagles are predators of sea otter pups. Yep. Yeah.
That is right, they enter it and-
Yeah, yeah. Wow, I've never seen that. Yeah, yeah,
They swim in that, pipe forest,
yeah,
where the mother goes down and gets food.
yeah. Then they can leave them at the surface in the kelp. Yeah, that makes sense. Yes.
Is there
Just-
any noticeable genetic effect from the pup?
That's a really good
Yeah,
question.
can we just repeat it for the Zoom people?
Oh,
that
sorry.
can't hear?
The question is there any effect of the presumed reduced genetic diversity that must arise because the population has arisen from a small handful of animals in Chequasit Bay? The answer is yes, there is reduced genetic diversity, and you can see that there's papers published showing that there's been a loss of genetic diversity. But in terms of, has it had some evident effect on the animals? The answer is no. And part of it has to do, I believe, something because the population grew quickly, so they didn't get stuck in a small pool of, they're reproducing very rapidly. Yes. No, I didn't. Okay, yes. So the question is, do sea otters, can you tell me about sea otters using tools? And that is absolutely true. Sea otters do use tools. They will use a rock. They will either use it as an anvil, or they will use it as either to bash something on, either they use it to bash an object, or they use it as a flat thing upon which they bash a hard-shelled prey. And they'll bring that rock up. They have what's called an axial pouch, which is like big floppy armpits. And they will actually bring the rock up under their armpit, which they also do with prey. So that I might add, it's like a picnic pouch when they're at the bottom. They'll bring things up under their armpits to the surface, including crab. So yeah, yes. Well,
Just repeat.
the question is, referring back to genetic diversity, what kind of diseases are these animals exposed to? Is there some, I think what you're asking, is there some greater prevalence or occurrence of a swath of diseases as a result of them having reduced genetic diversity? I guess the thing is, it's hard probably to answer that question because we're dealing with what we're dealing with, which is lower genetic diversity across the range, and we can't actually compare the health of the animals in the past. We can only compare genetic diversity with remains from midden sites where we're actually looking at the genetics of the bone, DNA extracted from the bones. As for the diseases that they're exposed to, sea otters, Toxoplasma gondii is a disease that has been a problem with sea otters, particularly in California. That's the one that is associated with cats. It doesn't come from cats, but it's often associated with cats. And another one is Sarcocystis neurona. Most of what they're exposed to are things that are coming, they're washing from the land into the sea, being taken up by the invertebrates that they eat, they feed on. We are not seeing a population effect of any of these diseases in BC at this time. There was an issue with the Toxoplasma gondii in California. I don't know that it's an issue at this point. I'm sorry, I can't give you a very more clear information, but the take-home message is no, we're not seeing a strong effect of lost genetic diversity on the resilience of the population at this point. Yes. Well, what you see is that, yeah, the question is, what's the effect on the clams and the crabs in the areas where the sea otters occur? Well, one thing is, one of the areas that I've done quite a bit of work on has got a very high density of sea otters, and they've been really well established there since at least the 1990s. And astonishingly, when you do foraging observations, they're still bringing up clams. So that tells me that although the clam density is lower, and probably if I was harvesting clams, I would be sad to find that the really big ones aren't there. In fact, there's enough feedback in these ecological interactions that there continues to be an abundance of clams, at least from an ecosystem perspective. For the crabs, it's kind of the same thing. I think it would be hard to put your crab trap out with great success in an area that's occupied by otters. It's not that they're extirpated. It's not that the crabs aren't there. They're just not going to be there in the density or in those particular areas. But again, you watch them eating crabs. So the species is around, just lower density. Yes.
Is that a motivator for others to move?
Yeah, so the question is, I think the question is, do sea otters, when they come into an area and there's a high abundance of large prey, because it's an area that has been without otters for a long time, pretty much like 100 years. So there's a ton of invertebrates. Once they've consumed the large ones, do these animals move on? Interesting, the answer is no. And that's a really cool thing about sea otters. These animals are not migratory. They don't travel great distances. They have these small home ranges over the course of their life. And what that means is that they have other strategies to cope with changes in prey size, density, and abundance. And that what they do is the diet shifts from eating those big ones, the big things are gone. They start eating smaller size prey, and eventually you end up with specialization. So some animals are focused on eating tunicates, whatever. So animals are focused on eating chitons, another one is focused on eating some type of a worm. Yep. Okay, over there, and yes.
Would they manage to sleep? How did they manage to sleep?
The question is, do sea otters sleep? Well, interestingly, we do tend to zonk right out and aren't even aware when we're asleep. Most animals don't actually. They all kind of sleep with, one eye open, as it were. But sea otters, I showed you that video of the animals in a raft when they're just sort of they're all kind of snoozing. They're just lying on their backs and they're snoozing. They pick these raft locations that are either in kelp beds or in areas where they're in the lee of the wind, and they just fall asleep and wake up in the same spot. Natural predators let's see, the biggest one in BC would be eagles on pups. So that's a huge one. Eagles, and so females have to really watch their pups don't get consumed. Turns out wolves are another predator. They're a scavenger, but in some places they have been known to actually take sea otters. California, it's sharks. Although the sharks aren't actually preying on the otters, they kill them because they think they're seals. So those are the main ones. And then in the Aleutians, we have an issue with killer whales have caused a massive decline, are believed to have been the cause of a massive decline of sea otters up there. So, but generally speaking, they don't have a lot of, and humans have been and are a predator.
When's the lifespan?
About 15 years for a male and 20 for a female. So, and then, okay, how about this one for you first? Sorry, because you had your hand up.
Curious, you mentioned that they don't tend to move out of their area very much, but in the map you showed, some had moved north. Do you know why or when that happened?
Yeah, so the question is, you just said, Linda, you just said that they don't migrate, they have small home ranges. So if that's the case, how did you, in that map where you showed the range expanding, how did that happen? So they have small home ranges. But animals, males, you end up with a large male raft at the edge of the occupied range. And in time, those males will move on into further areas that are unoccupied at this time where prey is more profitable. Their goal is to get big and strong and grow fast and large so that eventually they can move back into the areas that are occupied where there are female rafts so that they will have competitive edge to be able to have a territory. What ends up happening is the males move there and eventually females move in behind them. And what that is going to be animals. That's going to be the movement of juvenile animals or young animals that are moving into these new areas. So they're not dispersing, but they're moving in these. And the interesting thing about this way that they expand is it's truly an effect of a population having been extirpated and recovering into previous habitat. This wouldn't be the way the population would behave if all the habitat were occupied. So that'll be a different process. Yes.
So you mentioned the California ones thought that this otters were what, sharks?
Oh, that they, yeah, so the sharks in California are probably thinking that the thought is that think they're attacking a seal, which is what they're after.
Yes.
No, I think it's because there's this mortality from shark bites, but the carcasses are not consumed. So it appears that they've been bitten and injured and killed by the shark, but not the shark wasn't going to eat them. Yeah.
Too hairy.
Yeah, too furry.
Rubber, no
Yeah.
rubber.
Yeah, I know. It's a big fur ball. Yeah.
You see if there's some questions.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe we have to take the talk down.
Okay, yeah. And
That'll work.
oh, yeah, it's. Well, it's, we'll get some questions from Zoom here now. If this year's herring run,
Put it to your mouth so people hear you.
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I think it's on.
Oh, it's a question for you. Yeah.
Is there a problem with inbreeding depression from so few sea otters? Or we sort of,
The answer is no. And then I'm not a geneticist, so I can't explain better why, but no.
are they affected by red tide?
Interestingly, we think not. We think that there's an early study by a guy Kuvitic who has showed that sea otters could actually detect high levels of red tide in butter clams. So they don't appear to be affected by it.
And what is limiting the southward expansion of sea otters are ecosystems in southern Vancouver Island too
Depauperated.
depopulated.
No, what is stopping? So there are sea otters in Barkley Sound, and it's true they're not in any numbers. They seem to be sort of stalled out in Clayoquot Sound. And I'm not quite sure the reason. I'm not sure if it's an influence, something to do with humans. Or quite what it is, but Barkley Sound should represent an area that would be very good habitat for sea otters. And then when you get south of there onto the West Coast Trail, it's not such great habitat anyway. It would be a long swath of low density. I'm not really quite sure. I think it could take over any time. It could take off the number of animals in
Okay,
Barkley
then
Sound.
the last question on here
Yep.
was there a sighting of a single sea otter in the Triangle Islands off Victoria?
I expect there were. So yes, sea otters. So I showed you that range map of where they occur. This is where we see rafts of sea otters during the times when we survey sea otters. We call that the occupied range. But some of you are probably going, yeah, but my friend told me about a sea otter at Cable Bay, and my friend told me about one at Yellow Point. And you are right. There are what we call extraliminal sightings of individual otters. They're typically males. There's been one at Squamish. There's been so yes, if there has been a sea otter sighting off Triangle Island, I would definitely believe it.
Single male, probably.
Probably a single male. Yeah, not a mum pup.
question.
And a male at Race Rocks called Ollie, yes, yes. Well, what makes good habitat is it's got shallow variable depths that where it's rocky, that's with probably a fair bit of high energy to support a diversity of rocky habitat invertebrates. But also patches of soft sediment where you get clams and other species that burrow. Areas that provide, what I notice with otters is areas with rocky offshore reefs. And by reef, I don't mean coral, I mean just rocky areas where you'd crash your boat if you were there in a boat. And those areas provide little micro areas where sea otters can raft around the edges. And because the rocks slope away into the water, they create places where sea otters can feed literally just below the surface or further down if they're a mum pup. So places like Checklisset Bay, the New Chatlets is excellent habitat. Those are the kind of things. There are also, though, these soft sediment habitats that are potentially used more in the winter. I think we're going to see more of those areas being used as well. Yes.
Can you comment on the aggressive sexual behavior of sea otters?
Oh, yeah. So he's talking about, he's talking about males. There have been a number of incidences of male sea otters dragging around a dead cormorant or a dead river otter or a dead seal pup. And this is a male sea otter that has tried to copulate with this other animal, and in so doing has drowned and killed it. It's a very weird behavior. And the only thing I can think of is, you think, well, why does it occur in the population? There's no reason for it to be extinguished because it's just a weird behavior. It's not super prevalent, but people see it. And I think because there's no negative side to ultimately reproduction, it hasn't just, if it was a behavior that had a negative effect on breeding, then it would never have continued. So I sort of see it as this aberrant behavior that just persists. I don't know.
I thought that within the species that the males.
Oh, yeah. Okay. No, that's right. Okay, you're talking about, that's right. So the sea otter.
They should be cute, but they're also.
Yes, they are. Male sea otters, when they're copulating with the female, they grasp the nose of the female. And in California, the animals, it's very severe, and they're animals that are quite deformed on the face as a result of this. It's not clear why they do that. I think actually river otters and mink do that as well. And I don't know why. Yeah.
I had a question. I was wondering, when you have these rafts of, say, 200 males, obviously when they go to feed, they must have to spread out a little bit. So are they in those rafts like when they're not feeding? Like, do they all disperse at the same time to go feed, or are they just feeding and coming back?
It's a bit of both. So when we watch a raft, you see some animals coming and going from the edge, but there's also a diurnal, there's sort of a pattern to it where everybody's all rafted up. And then whether it's something to do with the tides changed or the winds picked up or it's rained, they all disperse and they all just take off and they go and forage. And then you wait 6 hours, you come back and they're all coming back to the same rafting location. Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll end it there. That was awesome. Great question and answer. Stepping with us. And yeah, just a lovely animal, and hopefully we'll all get a chance, if you haven't already, to see some. But thank you.